Welcome to Telling the African Stories the African Way. This is way before how Africa was, way before the Berlin Conference that changed the face and the future of Africa. And even at this moment, Africa is still playing the cards of the Berlin Conference. Episode 1 was all about what happened in the Berlin Conference. In 1984, a meeting called no African leader, no African prophets, no African spiritual leaders, no African chiefs, no African representation completely, but a group of European elites, quote unquote elites, drawing land for Africans and completely disorienting the African continent and the African culture. Episode 2, we're talking about borders with our people, while the lines they drew in the Berlin Conference still create tension, rivalry, and instability even up to today. So, before the Berlin Conference, African societies were organized around kingdoms, clans, empires, trade routes, and shared cultures. Boundaries existed, but they were flexible and human. People moved with seasons, trade, and marriages. Power shifted through negotiations, war, and alliances. Identity was rooted in language, ancestry, and land, things deeply connected to people, not maps. When the Europeans arrived, they ignored all of these. They saw Africa not as a home of millions of organized societies, but as an empty space to be claimed. Their borders cut directly through nations like Somali, the Maasai, the Ewe, the Yoruba, um, and the Bakongo, splitting families across different colonies and forcing new identities onto people who never chose them. When African countries gained independence in the mid 20th century, they did not inherit natural nations. They inherited colonial containers, fragile states stitched together from rival communities. Leaders were left to govern populations that had been forced into unity without trust. In many places, this created a permanent struggle of power. If one group controlled the government, others felt excluded and threatened, which was not. This imbalance turned politics into battlefields where ethnic identity often became more powerful than national identity. The result was a cycle of coups, rebellion, and civil wars that continued to affect African parts of the even up to today. In Rwanda, borders forced together two groups with long, complex history shaped and later sharpened by colonial rule. Germany and Belgium administrators deepened divisions by forcing one group over the other, turning social differences into political rivalry. The consequences exploded decades later in one of the most tragic genocides in human history. In Nigeria, over 250 ethnic groups were packed into one state. Tension between the Igbo, Hausa Fulani, the Yoruba, combined with uneven access to power and resources, led to the Biafran War and continue to affect national politics even today. In Sudan, colonial borders tied together north and south regions with different religions, culture, and economic systems, eventually leading to decades of civil war and painful births of South Sudan. Across African borders also carved through economic systems. Pastoral communities who were once grazing routes across wide lands suddenly found themselves illegal migrants in their own ancestral territories. Traders who once moved freely between regions were now required to cross international borders created in distant European offices. These artificial divisions weakened traditional economies and increased competitions for land, water, and political control. When resources became scarce, violence often followed. The problem is not only ethnic tension, it is also the structure of the African states themselves. Colonial governments were built to extract, not to serve. Roads led to ports, not between communities. Education was limited to selective. Security forces protected colonial interests, not citizens. When the independence came, many new African leaders inherited these systems unchanged. Power remained centralized, corruption became entrenched, and many governments struggled to gain the trust of their people. Citizens saw the state not as a shared project, but as a prize to be captured by any group strong enough to seize it. Borders our people also planted seeds of rivalry between nations. Disputes over land, minerals, lakes, and rivers still cause tension today. Conflicts in the Horn of Africa, the Great Lake region, and the Sahel are tied directly to colonial boundary lines that ignored reality on the ground. Fighters across borders that mean nothing to them, while governments struggle to secure territories that were never naturally unified. Refugee crisis, militant movements, and arms trafficking move easily through these weak boundaries, spreading instability from one country to another. Yet, the most painful legacy of the Berlin borders psychological. Colonial boundaries taught Africans to see one another as competitors instead of kin. They taught communities to fear each other for access of power. They turned diversity from strength into political weapon. Elections in many countries became moments of deep anxiety because losing power can feel like a threat to survival. This fear did not exist in the same form before colonial rule. It was manufactured by systems that rewarded divisions. Still, Africa is not a continent trapped by its past. It's a continent struggling to heal from it. Across the continent, young people are questioning inheritance divisions. Regional organizations promote cooperation over conflict. Artists, writers, athletes, and entrepreneurs are building connections that defy colonial boundaries. Pan-African ideas are rising again, reminding people that identity can be broader than the borders drawn in foreign rooms. But healing does not mean pretending the damage never happened. It means understanding that no, that today's tension is not simply the result of tribalism or poor leadership. It is rooted in historical injustice that rearranged entire societies without consent. True stability will not come only from stronger armies or tighter borders. It will come from justice, inclusion, fair distribution of resources, and political systems that serve all citizens equally. The lines drawn by Berlin were silent, but their consequences have been loud, echoing through wars, elections, refugees, and rivalries for over a century. They turned neighbors into foreigners and kings into competitors. They created nations before creating unity. And even today, Africa continues the long and difficult task of reshaping identity beyond borders that were never meant to protect people, only to control us. Do you agree with me that this is what is happening in Africa? And it will continue happening in Africa. That remote controlling, that foreign touch, foreign arm, foreign hand that is twisting, influencing every decision that is made by the African leaders will continue. Not unless we find a better way to pull out. It's all that for today. Kindly don't leave without subscribing because that subscription keeps us on air to bring you such information. If you're enlightened, why can't you cheer us, promote us, and be part? Subscribe and be part of us. Africa that was and Africa that is. Love you all.